There's a version of yourself you've constructed carefully over years. A narrative where you're fundamentally decent. Someone who extends help when others need it. Someone who puts people first. Someone whose intentions are clean. That narrative is a fabrication. Your kindness isn't kindness at all. It's a commercial exchange. Every gesture you make toward another person is a transaction where you're attempting to acquire something. Maybe it's their approval. Maybe it's the internal sensation of being valuable. Maybe it's the social capital that comes from being perceived as morally upright. When you assist someone, you're creating a debt. When you align yourself with their opinions, you're purchasing their affection. When you give something up for them, you're investing in their future gratitude. When you smile and stay pleasant, you're trying to become essential to them. This isn't virtue. This is strategic behavior. You're simply incompetent at executing it. The reason for your incompetence is straightforward. You've internalized the deception so thoroughly that you actually believe it. You genuinely think your motivations are untainted, that your helpful nature stems from moral evolution, that your pleasant demeanor reflects inner goodness. None of this is accurate. You're calculating. You're simply calculating for a currency that holds no real value. Machiavelli grasped this mechanism perfectly. His observations in his political writings revealed how the most outwardly virtuous individuals often wielded morality as their primary tool of control. Where others used direct force, these individuals traded acts of kindness for future loyalty. They exchanged generosity for invisible chains of obligation. They gave gifts that came with unspoken prices. This is your exact pattern. You're attempting to manipulate others into requiring you, into owing you, into seeing you as indispensable. Your weapon of choice is agreeableness instead of dominance. The problem is that it's failing because people detect the commercial nature beneath your gestures. They sense you're not genuinely generous, but rather starving for validation. They recognize you're not authentically kind, but desperately purchasing their regard. They accept what you provide, and they don't respect you for providing it. They understand it's not actually a gift. It's a desperate attempt to secure their validation. And desperation never generates respect. Here's what remains unspoken. Genuinely good people don't require constant confirmation of their goodness. They don't need validation after every act. They don't need recognition for every sacrifice. They simply behave in alignment with their internal standards and remain indifferent to whether anyone acknowledges it. You care intensely. You need others to witness how helpful you are, how much you surrender, how exceptional your character is. That need isn't virtue. That's ego wearing the mask of morality. By this video's conclusion, you'll recognize the exact mechanisms of your manipulation. You'll identify the specific daily moments where you're purchasing approval while labeling it kindness. You'll understand why this strategy consistently fails. And you'll see what exists beneath your performance of goodness. Most people traverse their entire existence believing they're the protagonist of a moral tale, that they're righteous souls surrounded by lesser beings. You're not. You're simply another individual pursuing what they want. You've selected manipulation through pleasantness as your approach, and you're failing at executing it. Watch how the transaction unfolds. Someone approaches you requesting help, a favor, your time, your energy. You agree, and internally you construct a narrative that says you're being supportive, that this is what decent people do. That's the deception. You're not agreeing because assistance genuinely motivates you. You're agreeing because you want to create obligation. You want them to perceive you as dependable, as someone they require, as someone who delivers. You're making an investment and expecting returns. Observe your internal reaction when the expected return doesn't materialize, when their gratitude seems insufficient, when they don't reciprocate, when they turn to someone else next time instead of you. You experience hurt, resentment, bitterness. Why does this happen? If you were genuinely just being helpful, their response would be irrelevant. You'd help and continue forward. But their response matters intensely because you weren't helping. You were purchasing, and they didn't pay the price you believed they owed. Machiavelli witnessed this pattern constantly in the power structures he observed. Individuals would perform services for leaders, expecting gratitude, loyalty, and future favor. When those expectations went unfulfilled, they'd become bitter and vindictive. Not because their generosity went unrecognized, but because their transaction didn't produce the expected profit. You're executing this identical pattern every single day. Consider a practical example. You spend hours helping someone relocate their belongings. You invest your time and physical energy. You tell yourself you're being a quality friend. But examine what occurs internally during and after this activity. You're maintaining a ledger, tracking how much effort you're expending, measuring how appreciative they appear, evaluating whether their gratitude matches your investment, wondering whether they'll remember this when you eventually need something. That's not generosity. That's accounting disguised as friendship. Authentic generosity doesn't maintain ledgers. It gives and releases completely. It doesn't track debts. You track constantly. And when the ledger fails to balance according to your expectations, resentment appears. That resentment is absolute proof you were never being generous. You are being transactional. Here's another way the transaction reveals itself. You align yourself with others not because you genuinely share their perspective, but because you want to secure their affection. Someone expresses a viewpoint. You hold a different one, but you suppress it. You either remain silent or actively agree with them. And you construct an internal narrative. You tell yourself you're being respectful, that you're demonstrating open-mindedness, that you're avoiding unnecessary conflict. That's the deception. You're not being respectful. You're being strategic. You're managing their perception of you. You're purchasing their approval by offering them agreement. And here's how you verify this. Watch your reaction when they disagree with you on something you actually care about. You become upset. Not because their position is incorrect, but because they're not providing you the same approval you provided them. You gave them agreement. You expected reciprocal agreement. When you didn't receive it, the transaction collapsed. Machiavelli wrote extensively about this pattern. He observed that individuals who agreed with everyone were perceived as weak rather than agreeable, because everyone could detect that their agreement wasn't authentic. It was strategic. It was purchasing favor. And people don't respect purchasers. They exploit them. Apply this to your daily reality. You're in a group setting. Someone expresses something you disagree with, but everyone else is nodding, supporting, agreeing. You say nothing. Or worse, you agree despite your actual opinion. Why? You tell yourself it's not worth the conflict, that you're choosing your battles wisely, that you're being mature. That's the deception. You're being calculating. You're managing the group's perception of you. You're trading your authentic opinion for social approval. That's manipulation, not maturity. Here's the third way the transaction exposes itself. You sacrifice. You surrender something you desire, your time, your preferences, your needs, all for someone else. And you tell yourself you're being selfless, that you're prioritizing others, that this is what love resembles, what friendship resembles, what being a good person resembles. That's the deception. You're not being selfless. You're purchasing something. You're purchasing their appreciation, their debt to you, their recognition of your exceptional character. Watch what happens when they don't appreciate it sufficiently. when they don't acknowledge your sacrifice, when they don't seem to notice what you surrendered for them. You experience hurt, resentment. You want them to understand what you sacrificed. You want recognition, appreciation, validation for how selfless you are. That need for recognition proves it was never selfless. It was transactional. Authentic sacrifice doesn't require recognition. It occurs quietly. It's completed and released. Your sacrifice needs an audience, needs validation, needs appreciation, because you're not sacrificing, you're investing, and you expect returns on your investment. Machiavelli observed that the most outwardly selfless individuals in positions of power were often the most manipulative. They'd sacrifice publicly, ensure everyone witnessed their generosity, then collect on the social debt they'd manufactured. That's your pattern. Your sacrifice isn't quiet, it's performed. You ensure people know what you surrendered, what you endured, how much you do for others, because you need them to owe you, to perceive you as good, to validate that you're superior to people who don't sacrifice. Apply this immediately to your life. You cancel plans you genuinely wanted because your partner or friend needs you. You tell yourself this is what caring people do, that you're being supportive, that you're putting them first. But watch what occurs inside you. You're tracking, mentally noting that you sacrificed, expecting them to remember, hoping they'll reciprocate when you need it. And when they don't, when next time they can't do the same, you mention it. You bring it up. Remember when I canceled my plans for you? That's not love. That's debt collection disguised as care. Here's the fourth mechanism through which the transaction reveals itself. You're nice. Not because you're authentically kind, but because you're attempting to control how others perceive you. You smile when you don't feel like smiling. You're polite to people you actually dislike. You're friendly toward people who don't deserve friendliness. And you tell yourself you're being the bigger person, that you're mature, that you're evolved. That's the deception. You're not being the bigger person. You're being manipulative. You're managing perception. You're purchasing social approval through performed agreeableness. And here's how you know it's performance. It costs you something. It drains your energy. Authentic kindness doesn't drain you. It's natural. It flows effortlessly. Your niceness exhausts you because it's not natural. It's calculated. It requires constant effort to maintain an image. Machiavelli would identify this as the exhaustion of performance. When you're attempting to be something you're not, it demands constant energy to sustain. You're exhausted from being nice because you're not actually nice. You're performing niceness to purchase approval, and performance is inherently exhausting. Consider your daily reality. You're around people you don't particularly like, but you're friendly, engaging, nice. Not because you want to be, but because you want them to think you're a good person. You want to maintain the image. You want the social credit of being liked. That's manipulation. You're attempting to control their perception through performed agreeableness. And they can detect it. They sense you're not authentic. So they don't trust you. They don't respect you. They simply utilize the niceness you're offering and provide nothing genuine in return, because nobody respects someone who's purchasing their approval. So you're manipulative. You're transactional. You're using niceness as a strategy to acquire what you want. Why doesn't it work? Because you're incompetent at manipulation. You're obvious, desperate, needy. Skilled manipulators conceal the transaction. They make it appear effortless, natural, like they're not trying. You're trying intensely, and everyone perceives it. Machiavelli wrote that the most effective manipulators are those who make it appear they're not manipulating at all. Their favors seem genuine. Their kindness seems authentic. Their sacrifices seem selfless. Yours don't. Because you need the validation too intensely. You need them to see how good you are, how much you do, how selfless you are. That need is visible, and it's repulsive. Here's why you're incompetent at it. First, you expect immediate returns. Skilled manipulators play extended games. They invest without expectation of immediate profit. They build debt gradually. They don't rush the collection. You can't wait. You help someone and immediately you're checking. Are they grateful enough? Do they appreciate it? Do they acknowledge what you did? That desperation for immediate validation makes the transaction obvious. And once people see the transaction, they don't respect you. They simply exploit you. Second, you keep score openly. Skilled manipulators track everything privately. They remember every favor, every sacrifice, every instance they helped, but they never mention it. They allow the other person to feel the debt without explicitly stating it. You can't execute this. You mention what you did. You remind them of your sacrifices. You point out how much you help. Every time you do this, you're revealing the manipulation. You're exposing the transaction, and that destroys any power it possessed. Machiavelli observed that the moment you explicitly state what someone owes you, you've lost, because now they know you're keeping score, and they'll resent the debt rather than feel obligated by it. Third, you need validation more than you want power. Skilled manipulators want outcomes. They want influence. They want people to behave according to their desires. You don't want power. You want approval. You want people to think you're good. You want validation that you're selfless and kind. That need for validation makes you weak, because you'll continue giving even when you receive nothing in return, just hoping that eventually they'll validate how good you are. And they won't, because people don't respect neediness. They exploit it. Fourth, you're manipulating for worthless currency. Machiavelli understood that power is the only currency with actual value. Approval, validation, being liked. These are worthless if you don't possess power. You're trading genuine resources, your time, your energy, your sacrifice, for fake currency, for approval, for being liked, for feeling good about yourself. And you're receiving nothing genuine in return. Because approval doesn't translate to respect. Being liked doesn't translate to power. Feeling good about yourself doesn't translate to actual results. You're incompetent at manipulation because you're trading gold for bronze and believing you're winning. So what are you actually? You're not the good guy. You're not even successfully manipulative. You're desperate, needy, performing goodness to purchase approval from people who will never respect you because they can detect the desperation underneath. You help because you need to be needed, not because you're generous. You agree because you need to be liked, not because you're agreeable. You sacrifice because you need to be appreciated, not because you're selfless. You're nice because you need approval, not because you're kind. All of it is need. Desperate, obvious need disguised as virtue. And need is the weakest position you can operate from. Machiavelli wrote that individuals who need are controlled by what they need. That need makes you controllable. As long as you need approval, anyone can control you by threatening to withhold it. You're completely controlled by anyone who can grant or remove validation. By anyone whose opinion matters to you. You'll do anything to maintain their approval. You'll sacrifice anything. You'll compromise anything. Because you need that validation more than you need your own integrity. That's not strength. That's not virtue. That's weakness disguised as goodness. Here's what you actually are. You're someone who is taught that being good earns love. That being helpful earns appreciation. That being selfless earns validation. And you believed it. So you performed goodness. You helped, you sacrificed, you were nice, and it didn't work the way you expected. People didn't love you more. They didn't appreciate you more. They didn't validate you more. They simply used you more. And instead of recognizing the strategy doesn't work, you doubled down. You decided you weren't being good enough, helpful enough, selfless enough. So you gave more, sacrificed more, were nicer, and still nothing changed. Because the strategy is fundamentally flawed. Goodness doesn't earn respect. It doesn't earn power. It doesn't even earn genuine appreciation. It earns exploitation. People will exploit your goodness as long as you offer it, and they won't respect you for it. Machiavelli observed that leaders who attempted to rule through being loved were overthrown by leaders who ruled through being feared. That love is unstable. That people will abandon you the moment loving you becomes inconvenient. But fear, respect backed by consequences, that's stable. That's power. You have no consequences. You only have neediness disguised as niceness, and people feel no obligation to respect that. Here's the truth you can't accept. You're not a good person. You're a needy person who performs goodness to acquire approval. That performance has cost you everything: respect, power, authenticity, genuine connection. Because people don't connect with performance. They connect with truth. And you're not being truthful. You're being strategic. You're being manipulative, just incompetently. Every act of goodness has a transaction underneath. Every sacrifice has an expectation attached. Every agreement is purchasing approval. None of it is authentic. All of it is calculated. And the worst part? You know this. Deep down. You know you're not actually selfless. You know you keep score. You know you need validation. You know you're hurt when you don't receive the appreciation you expected. You simply can't admit it. Because admitting it destroys the identity you've constructed. The identity of being good, of being superior to people who don't sacrifice, of being morally elevated. That identity is fabricated. It's a lie you tell yourself to avoid confronting what you actually are. Desperate for approval, needy for validation, calculating underneath the performance of virtue. Machiavelli would tell you this: the moment you stop needing their approval is the moment you gain actual power. The moment you stop performing goodness and start being honest is the moment you become authentic. But you won't, because the lie is more comfortable than the truth. The lie allows you to think you're good, allows you to feel superior, allows you to blame others for not appreciating you enough, rather than facing that your strategy is fundamentally broken. Here's where you exist. You tell yourself you're a good person, kind, helpful, selfless, nice. That's the lie. You're transactional. Every act of goodness is a purchase attempt. You help to be needed. You agree to be liked. You sacrifice to be appreciated. You're nice to acquire approval. None of it is virtue. It's manipulation. You're simply incompetent at it because you need the validation too intensely, because you keep score too obviously, because you're desperate for approval from people who will never respect neediness. You're not the good guy. You're not even the effective manipulator. You're the person who trades everything genuine for fake currency and wonders why you're not respected. The truth is simple. People don't respect goodness. They exploit it. They don't respect sacrifice. They expect it. They don't respect niceness. They take advantage of it. You've spent your entire life attempting to earn something that can't be earned through the strategy you're using. And you'll continue doing it because admitting you're not the good guy destroys the comfortable lie you've lived inside your entire life. The lie you tell yourself every day is that you're good. The truth is simpler. You're needy. And you've been calling need virtue to avoid facing how desperate you actually are. Stop performing. Start being honest. Stop manipulating for approval. Start operating from truth. Stop needing validation from people who will never give it. Start building actual power. Or don't. Keep performing. Keep being nice. Keep sacrificing. Keep helping. And keep wondering why nobody respects you for it. The choice is yours. But stop lying to yourself about what you're actually doing.